oscuro o digamos mundo artificial. ¿Puedes presentar algunos ejemplos de qué es el mundo artificial?
Bueno, nuestro conocimiento, digamos, nuestra idea no es del mundo artificial. Nuestro espíritu es del mundo natural, porque yo nunca he salido en ningunos países, sino he estado en mis montañas. Ellos son los guías, mis defensas, mi seguridad tanto en alimentos, en mis conocimientos. Y por igual yo digo, aquí no vinimos para sufrir, para pelear, para echarnos mentiras, nada. Este mundo está bien desarrollado, está bien constituido, está bien reglamentado, está ante una luz, porque aquí no anochece, aquí solamente es una sombra. Entonces, por mucha gente se alimentan, se visten con el espíritu del mundo oscuro. Entonces, las personas del mundo oscuro no ve el mundo natural, sino solamente lo que inventan de puros juegos. Todo lo que hacen hacen con herramientas juegos, y en el cuerpo, en el corazón se convierte puro fuego negativo, porque les gusta trabajar con puro fuego. Entonces esa persona está en el mundo oscuro, nunca está, dice que estoy de día, pero en el pensamiento está en el mundo oscuro. Entonces nunca va a ver la luz. Pero si empieza a ver el mundo natural, ya empieza a despejar, a ver la luz realmente en este físico como humano. Porque si personas dicen que hoy amaneció, hoy es de día, hoy es noche, pero nunca en el pensamiento no tiene luz, está en el mundo oscuro. En cambio, la persona que es de mundo, una luz de día, ve la consecuencia junto con todas las vidas de los seres vivientes como el mundo natural. Esa persona es de una luz y garantiza la vida a los demás sociedad. Porque el que no garantiza es porque no tiene en la mente y sufres, no sabe ni de dónde va. No tiene oído, no tiene vista, solamente comer y ya. Es puro como fuego. Cuando usted echa candela, quema a todos. Entonces candela, mente de fuego, no podemos vivir con ese espíritu en este mundo físico. Porque uno mismo se está destruyendo a través de un sistema que es de puro fuego.
¿Y qué hay de ejemplos de invenciones de ese tipo de persona?
Deben pensar salirse del sistema de puro fuego y empezar a ver realidad al mundo físico. ¿Cuántas montañas de agua hay? ¿Cuáles son los árboles? Tipo de faunas. Ya empieza como a capitalizarse en la mente. Entonces, en base a eso, ya empezará a trabajar con el sistema que hacen.
Y ejemplos de como gente de fuego, trabajando con puro fuego, ¿qué inventan? Carros, torres.
Bueno, dicen, el mundo debe haber desarrollo. En este mundo debe haber desarrollo. Habiendo aviones, habiendo cantidad de carros, cantidad de edificios, pero todo atraen del suelo, tumbando palos, árboles, quebrando montañas, explotando minerio, o sea, sacando herramientas de esa montaña, pero un avión no va a producir agua, ni carro no va a producir agua, pero cuando estaba dentro de la montaña estaba produciendo agua puro, aire puro, bosque puro, el mundo natural. Y es el espíritu del mundo natural. Entonces, mucha gente decimos, no podemos vivir pobre, no podemos vivir triste, hay que vivir en un mundo lleno de felicidades, pero destruyendo nuestra misma casa, nuestro mismo alimento, nuestro mismo aire, no vamos a vivir bien, se destruye uno mismo. Entonces quiere decir que el mundo está viviendo el pensamiento y el espíritu en el mundo oscuro. Hay que ver la garantía de la vida es el mundo natural, el mundo verde.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. And we're just going to have our chat with my friend and yours, Santo. Santo, how are you?
I'm doing well, Bruce. It's a perfect day up in the mountain here. One of the best days we've had in a long time after this bloody wet season. So we're enjoying some sun for a change. How are you going?
Um, Everything's pretty good here, you know. I mean, it's been a busy Easter. I've got like 8 boys here, about 15 years old, 14, 15 years old. Um, my wife and I are sleeping up in the front house. They've got the whole back, and they're just kind of doing their own thing. And my wife really likes that. It reminds her of when she grew up, right? She had 10 siblings and there were 11 kids. So it's like heaven for I just stay in my little man cave here, the bodega, and I have a 32-inch TV hooked up to the Mac Mini here, so I just veg out, watch TV, meditate, do a bit of kung fu, and then, you know, I don't want to get in anybody's way, but it's nice. It's nice. It's nice to have a bunch of kids here. It's nice. It's nice to be around young people, who are just, seeing the world for what it is and living it and enjoying it and not sort of caught up in the adult perceptual responsibilities of people like you and I. It's it's very refreshing actually.
Well, it's a gentle reminder that life goes on, because you're absolutely right. We can get a little bit caught up in the narrative, for want of a better word, and start to overthink it. Uh, like we were having a chat, was it yesterday when I was at the park in Brisbane? So,
Yeah.
well, I
Yeah.
can't even, no, a couple of days ago anyway. And we were catching up with all our kids and grandkids. So there's 8 grandkids, 4 kids. And it was a wonderful picnic. And
Hmm.
exactly what you said, we have a picnic and everyone catches up. And there's so many stories. Everyone's got their story, this story, that story. And then we have a soccer game and everyone's running around. And I nearly broke my knee. I got to remember how old I'm getting.
Yeah.
I'm kind of running around like a crazy person, and then
That's
next
what,
minute I'm like, oh, I think I've done some damage.
yeah.
Yeah.
Young people do not understand this. As you age, in your head, you're always 23 or 24. And then you
Yeah.
go you
I
go
went
to
in for
do
the
the last big reminder for me was walking to Sergio's place on the reserve last year with my son and my buddy John and one of my son's buddies. And for the first, this has never happened to me before. Um, my legs gave out and I just fell down. And I for the
yeah.
first time in my life I understand that expression from boxing, his legs gave out. And
Well, yeah.
I had a walking stick like Moses and I just fell on the walking stick and put my hand on a tree. Not something you want to be doing in the rainforest. And then everybody goes, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, just give me a second." And then I shook off my legs and then I just kept walking. But and I mean I'm only 58, right? I think
Well,
probably 57 when I did that walk. And and you can do all the gym stuff and everything. Like I still have the strength. Like I can easily do a set of I don't know, minimum 50, maybe 65 push-ups in one set. Real push-ups like military form. But the basic endurance, that stuff that an 8-year-old has where they can just run around all day, that's what starts to go, right?
yep, yep. And you get reminded when you do the babysitting. If anybody is confused about the concept of relativity of time, this time is do some babysitting
Yeah.
because A, it's always going to take longer, and B, they never come back when they say they do. I'll just be out for a couple of hours, and 5 hours later, you're still there going, "Oh my God, I don't
Yeah.
know whether I can do this." But
Yeah.
yesterday, one of my daughter's partners, who plays a lot of soccer, and he does what they call Ironmen and triathlons, and so he's fit.
Yep.
Uh, and I thought I can tackle him. That was a big mistake.
Yeah.
He took me out big time. And I kind of, how you cover it up, you go, I'll be right. And then I get home and I'm like, oh, I better do something about this knee.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just catches up with you. But I really like that, I can look at the world and do this podcasting and then just fall back into my grounded life. And I hear, I talk to a lot of my listeners. Some days, some days, Santo, I can be 4 to 6 hours over the course of 3 to 5 different conversations, maybe 7 conversations with different listeners of the Talamanca Review I've befriended over the last year. And everybody needs to talk to me that day, so I talk something they heard in a podcast, and it just and then when you get to know people and they feel that they can call you anytime they want, which they can, because I'm not a big enterprise here. I'm not, I'm just some guy podcasting. That Talamanca Reviews become something of a satsang, a spiritual community. And so I talk to people and they just call me whenever they want to call me. And I like a lot of people say that like the intuitive flow of the show is so good. Like the Hero podcast was perfectly timed. I had a couple ladies call me and say, "Oh, thank God you did that. Otherwise, I would have had to taken a break from the Talamanca Review. It's just so intense, the information you're giving." And I said, "Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. That's why I did the Heroes podcast, you know?" And it's a lot of information, and it just some cosmic tumbler fell into place at the beginning of March. And I was in transit. You don't always notice these things when you're in transit. I was in Panama and then I got back here. And then after about a week I went, "No, this is not just going to Panama City. This is something different." But that tumbler was like the last tumbler in of four to open a safe door of information and downloads. And I just started this 2 months of podcasting that everything is just clicking and clicking and clicking. But my God, is it ever intense? The womb inseminated by Solomon, the Black Star cult, everything. And then, I can't imagine what it's like to be living in a big city like Melbourne or Sydney or Toronto or Los Angeles or Amsterdam or the Netherlands and living in a first world country with all of its stresses and toxins, electromagnetic and chemical, and in the food. And then you're listening to the Talamanca Review, unless you're taking a 1 hour bath in Epsom salts, there's no way you're going to get that off you. And I forget that sometimes, right? Like I do these intense podcasts and people don't see what happens after I hang up. I go grab my wife, let's go for a walk, and we go for a 3 kilometer walk down the road into the jungle. You
Mm.
hear all the
Yeah, that,
birds.
you're right. But see, the thing is, unless you resonate with the experience that you're talking about, it in our world here, like it's this Easter break at the moment, and we went for a walk in the rainforest. We live in the rainforest this morning, and we thought, let's get out there early because it's this Easter holiday period. And it's literally, even at that hour, crawling with tourists. So, this kind of program that says, I'm happy with my materialistic pornographic world over here, but at certain times I get in the car and I expect to find a parking spot and I expect to find the cafe open and I expect to do a nice walk in nature and I'll be happy then. So this programmed way of nature immersion is a very interesting way that people feel as though they're okay.
Yeah.
Now, contrast that to the um, video you shared earlier of that tribal leader giving a very simple explanation of the difference between living with nature, the way he and his tribe always has, and
Speak as though the viewer has seen it, because I'm gonna put it into the before our interview starts. I'm gonna start with that 5.5 minute video of the Achicoro,
okay,
Colombian
okay,
native shaman. He just
okay.
nailed it, eh?
He absolutely nails not just how nature connectivity and living is a resonance that works naturally, but how the game, as he calls it, is something that is what you have been describing and what we generally understand as the cube or the black box.
Yeah,
And that game played within that box is insatiable in terms of being able to satisfy
yeah.
whatever the human need is.
And
It's insatiable.
you were reading the subtitles, right?
I was reading the
Well,
subtitles.
you
Yeah,
know
I
what he
don't speak
calls it,
Spanish.
eh? El mundo oscuro, the dark world. He actually even calls it the dark world.
He does a brilliant job of a very simple explanation of what the essence of light is
Yeah,
and and how the mind, as he says, the mind is dark, you
yeah,
know. So it's so difficult to explain these concepts when people greet you at a Starbucks and they've just come from their gym or their yoga and they feel as though the light is all around them,
yeah.
but their mind is dark.
El
And
mundo
and you
oscuro.
can't, I find that you got to let it go because particularly if you take it on, all you do is create distance between yourself and those you care about or those you want to share time with,
Yeah,
particularly family. So if you stay in that state, your presence will be disturbing
yeah,
to those in the social mix.
yeah,
And they will be triggered by your presence, which is light. So
yeah,
sometimes just tone it down a bit,
yeah,
just dim it, put the dimmer on
yeah,
and just enjoy it. Just don't turn the volume up because people start, then they put their shades on and go, stay away from him. He's a little bit, ooh,
yeah,
midday sun type effect. Could get cancer from him, right?
yeah,
So
absolutely.
I don't know. I just think we're in that phase where it's not just we talk about spirit and being spirit connected, but it's a combination of everything. Emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
uh, caring in terms of a way that's not fake, but also looking after yourself and knowing if everyone's had 6 drinks and you're trying to have conversations, well, maybe it's time to leave. Yeah, and that's okay, you know. But these sweet spots, these continual sweet spots that we can function in are getting harder to not only detect, but to participate in, even in your own family circle.
Yeah.
So you're constantly, but you don't want to continually think ahead. It's kind of like you're remote viewing your own life.
Yeah.
And particularly if you're in a relationship where you get, you're on the same page, but you try to anticipate some upcoming social event.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? You're manifesting a level of reality that maybe didn't have to happen
I agree.
because you, right? So just be present, just be present.
And then
And
I think also that money sort of electroshocks the moments that people live in the first world, because there's this capitalization. I mean, some of the people I keep in contact with, just friends, not necessarily related to my podcast, but I mean, they'll call me with this imperative. And I mean, you would think a house was on fire and 3 children under 5 were on the second floor. And they're just calling to tell me, like, why haven't you bought XRP yet? Bruce, it's all going to crypto. And I'm going, I don't know. How's that going to affect the banana plants here? Like, how is that, But it for them and their financial situation, what I realized is it really is life and death, Santo, for them. And that's part of how they've trapped people in this black box in the first world.
you're right, but see, I was having this conversation with my son actually on at the picnic, and what I try to do in those conversations is put myself in their shoes at that age,
Yeah,
but try to imagine being in this particular generation, because in reality, at that age, there's a lot going on. And I look back and I think, well, I did law, and then the technology came, and I thought, well, that's where it's going. And I was fully immersed in the world of technology. Now,
yeah,
it doesn't mean to say you sold your soul, but
yeah,
what it means is you participated in a practical way to navigate through chapters of life
yeah,
without fully participating,
yeah,
if you know what that means, right?
yeah,
So you're there, but you're not actually signing these contracts that they can, like for example, you go in the early days of Silicon Valley, they smother you with options,
yeah.
right? They want to lock you in, right?
So
And,
my,
and
my son went to see his grandmother yesterday, my mother. I haven't seen her since 2018. We talk about once a month for maybe 20 minutes. We're not close. I left home at 16. We're not super close, but I like to form ties when people are getting closer to death. My mom's about 87 now. I find them more open to me. And and while my son was there, his uncle, my brother, called, and my brother was a managing director slash vice president, like top 1% of employees at one of the biggest banks in Canada. And then the last 5 years of his 30-year career, he shuffled over to the Canada Pension Plan, where he retired second in command, and they offered him the top spot, like the guy that does the press interviews with the Canada Broadcasting Corporation, $1 million a year salary. He turned it down. Now he's been retired now about 4 years. While he was visiting my mother, his grandmother, she called him so that my son Brandon could speak to him because he hadn't spoken to him, I don't think, since my dad's funeral in 2022. And I said, "What was it like talking to your Uncle Ross?" And my son said it was like a a bank loan application. Just and he can't shake it even 4 years after retirement. You know, I don't think he'll ever come out of it. And maybe it's a blessing he doesn't. Because
Yeah,
what would come about? Now, you and I have never talked about this. You know, we're both guys who went into the world, and I mean, I did quite well when I wanted to. I mean, 2000, 2001, 2002, I probably made just shy of $200,000 in each of those years and laid the financial groundwork for the house my son would be living in. And his mom got a house down payment, all her debts were cleared, and then we divorced. But what saved me, Santo, was I was never in that world 12 months a year. I would never contract longer than 6, 8, or a few times, like from I think 2007 to 2010, I was at one company on a renewing annual contract. And then when I was at the bank, I ended up working for 3 years at the bank my brother was a vice president at, but I didn't go there until after he had left. And that was not intentional. It's just the way it worked out. And I contracted there for 3 years straight. And I noticed that when I worked somewhere 3 years straight, I would start to go crazy. And I started to wonder if I'd ever be able to write a book again. And I felt like I was going into quicksand. But for most of my career, I never worked more than 6 months in a year. So I never got swallowed up. My question to you is, how did you go through the heady world of technology as a project manager for a couple decades or longer and stay alive spiritually?
yeah.
How'd you do that?
Uh, I think Sicilian genes help, because you kind of, a bit of this, a bit of that. But Sicilian genes, sense of humor, and always being the one that is identified as, hey, he's a pointy head, tinfoil hat. And so you could be treated with this kind of, he's crazy. But at the same time, you get the job done. So I always made a point of being independent and deliverable based so that I'll be left alone. And but when you're in a CIO or those sort of positions, you've got big teams. To me, all that hierarchy may as well have been an imprint of the reptilian structures in
Yeah,
micro form. Meant nothing to me.
yeah,
So I would gather teams and say, listen, I don't care about titles. I don't care about hierarchy. If you've got a problem and you want to talk about it, make sure you've got a solution. Don't come to the office unless you've got a solution or more than one solution.
yeah,
But if you've got a job to do, get it done. I'll leave you alone. If you've got a problem, let us know, offer some solutions. So having that kind of approach gave me enormous freedom in a world that normally micromanages you.
yeah,
And by having that approach, I was able to navigate in a way that people would not be concerned about what I was up to because they
yeah,
knew they'd get the deliverable. So I could spend time reading stuff when I got my deliverable done to get my sanity back, or go for a walk, or go and sit in the sun. But I would introduce things out of the box. For example, fitness to me was important to de-stress and that. So wherever I went, I would start social things like running in lunchtime, which they'd think was nuts. But I go, right, we're going to go for a jog,
yeah,
right? and doing things that would make the environment a little bit more fun. Yes, we got a job to do, and you know how stressful technology can be and how pointy-headed it can become.
Yeah.
And being thrown into those situations, particularly in Silicon Valley in the early days, uh, you can set yourself up for some very, very unusual situations where you're expected to do something that you have no idea about. So, how much do we bluff our way through life? I think we bluff our way through a lot of things. And it's a great platform to uh, experience for how life is working now.
Yeah.
In other words, did I bluff my way through corporate life? Well, from one perspective, absolutely, because I never felt I was qualified. I would sit there and make sure I understood every friggin' acronym that existed,
Yeah.
so that if the nerds from the team nerd from the basement came up because they thought I was a pointy-headed boss, I would memorize the acronym to confuse them that they'd think I knew what I was talking about. I had no friggin' idea what I was talking about.
Yeah.
But I put their pointy-headed, narrow-minded way of dealing with things. But I think what it also teaches you is to how to be nimble and how to connect dots. So the ability to see big picture, you don't have to say, oh, I'm stuck in the hierarchical material world and I can't wait till I finish work so I can meditate for 2 hours.
Yeah.
If you put yourself into a state of mind while you're doing a presentation or doing anything, into that state of mind that you float above the room and start drawing the big picture. That's why I'd never prepare presentations, but I'd always make sure I had a whiteboard and it'd look like the aliens had landed by the time I was finished, because it'd
Yeah.
just be squiggles and dots and join this and join that and this and that. And to me, that kind of practice of just seeing patterns, they exist everywhere. So the corporate world does serve a purpose. If you have a reason to be there, make it work for you in the purest way you can.
Yeah.
Don't think it's a prison. There's opportunities everywhere. Doesn't matter
Yeah.
where you live, what you're doing. Where's the opportunity, right? So
Yeah.
I survived because I never missed an opportunity to just be my version of spiritual. I
Yeah.
didn't care where I was. I didn't care how I was judged. And if you
Yeah.
do that,
That's
they leave you
courageous.
alone.
Yeah, that's very
I
courageous.
think, yeah, but I didn't care about money in that sense, but I cared a lot about money. So
Yeah.
how can you be both? So it's kind of like, uh, in other words, I think it's the attachment that brings us down
Well,
because,
yeah, so another thing is I think when you have a good spiritual base and you have something that you do on top of your family and your work, like I know that you've been a musician your whole life, and I would always start working on a book in between contracts. And it always brought me back to life. It always resurrected me.
yeah,
And but I think about, some of the people I worked with over the years, if they were to read Light of Darkness or Stardust Ranch or The Devil in Us, they'd go, who the hell did I work with for 2 years? Like there's the disparity between the personalities is so great. And I think that this let's stick with the terminology I've come up with. Like I think this black star energy, it's really in the corporate world too. Like you could really lose yourself after 30 years of climbing that ladder. And it gets particularly intense around speaking in 2025 years. around the $400,000 a year mark. That's when you're really in danger of losing your connection with life and the divine and becoming an automaton, becoming a corporate zombie. You see it all the time over here, and I imagine when I start the tourism up here, I'm going to see it big time, right? Like
I,
big
I
time.
don't I don't see it in terms of the 300, 400, whatever that way. To me, I would always make sure I understood the deliverable. And if the value in terms of effort and energy I put in to contribute to give them that deliverable was fair, it didn't matter to me what that money was,
Yeah,
right? What it added up to. Because and I agree with you, if you don't have a way of reconciling your energetic exchange and you just have this big reward, you're getting $500,000 a year, you will eventually question in a way that you lose track of your currency. It's
yeah,
just this big reward, and the reality of the disparity of how it doesn't match will become apparent because you're not reconciling your energetic exchange with deliverables, right?
yeah,
But I agree. What becomes apparent is that it's imbalanced. The more senior you go, the more you see the non-deliverable exchange of masses of amounts of dollars for an unbalanced
yeah,
exchange,
yeah,
i.e., corruption, greed,
yeah,
and you see it all around you, but you have to block that out, and not because some people then fall victim to being martyrs, and then they get used. So they go, I'm not a money person. I had this problem with my son in a way where he didn't want to sell out. But at the same time, if you've got talent, don't sell yourself short. And
yeah,
the corporate industries managed to leverage that in recent generations by calling it work experience.
yeah,
No, this guy's got talent. And they just use people for work experience,
yeah,
get their pound of flesh out of them, and give them zero reward. You got work experience.
yeah.
No, they didn't.
And I
They put
think,
in a lot of effort.
yeah. So my point about the music and the writing for me is, I mean, God help you if all of your self-worth is tied up in that corporate world. I mean, God help you.
Exactly.
It is, I don't think you can lose your soul, but you can lose your connection with compassion, and you can lose your connection with life, which is, in a sense, is losing the soul awareness in you. But that then
Well, yes,
you're really in danger of this getting your soul scalped. And I
yeah,
think I'm not, I'll watch as the years go by, but I'm very curious to see if my brother ever gets it back. But the big question is whether he ever even had it. He's been this way since he was 8 years old, like just like a performance horse, right? And anyways, let's segue out of this. I want to spend a bit of time and talk a little bit about, some of the information I've dumped in the last month. How are you taking it in? The womb inseminated by Solomon, the Black Star cult. That was quite a revelation about Kissinger going right back to the Nazi weapons labs in the Bavarian mountains at the age of 22 as an army intelligence officer. How did that never come out in his bio? How did Christopher Hitchens miss that? Who wrote,
yeah.
you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. But if you look at the material and the way you're presenting it, and you try to overlay it into what we've just been talking about, i.e., the hierarchical way of progressing through life, it would be one of those things that before you start playing the video, it'd say please make sure you've done the beginners and the intermediate class before watching, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the way it is.
Yeah.
And it's very, very difficult to reconcile the information you're giving against the reality of the time we're in. It's kind of like the clock being 5 minutes to midnight.
Yeah.
And so, in a way, you're trying to also say, yes, it would be nice if I could say, listen, before you watch this one, watch these 20 other ones, read these 20 books, do this, spend 3 years doing that, right? And then watch this. But it's just not like that now. So we're all on a very accelerated roller coaster ride, and we have to strap ourselves in and just
Yeah.
go, I can do this. That is up to the individual.
Yeah.
So what's happening is the individuals that are strapped in and have ridden some pretty wild roller coaster rides have no problem focusing and not being, most importantly, destroyed by that information. The
Yeah.
person that hasn't done the intermediate class walks away and they're walking around in a daze, and they probably go to the pub just to kind of put themselves back into
Yeah.
this reality and then go, and they look around over their shoulder. Is the devil following me? Have I got a demon? Right?
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
kind of difficult to prepare yourself for the being you need to be
Yeah.
to fully process that information.
Yeah.
Plus, it's not easy to, words cannot put what that story is about. You do a good job in terms of trying, but I can also see sometimes that you're trying to massage and remassage the words, and you go, it's more than words now. They either get it or they don't, right?
Yeah.
And it's very, but to me, it's also a penny dropping exercise. And that's why I say, when you say watch it again, sometimes people get a headache when they watch it once and their programs and their filters totally misinterpret or get triggered by what's being said. And then on a rewatch, bang, the penny drops. They go,
Yeah.
oh, the devil. The devil is my friend. Now I know what Bruce was talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, what I mean.
I I can't even imagine what it's like to be presented with me in the books and the podcast. Now I get a sense of it,
This
so
this is it, Bruce. Bruce, this is it. Here's Bruce is coming. Bruce is coming.
yeah. No, I do about once a month now. I do get somebody reach out to me and they've gone 30 podcasts back and they've read two or three of the books. And then they hit this moment where they want to know me. They need to speak to the person who wrote the books, who does the podcast. And through those encounters, I get a sense of what it's like to meet me, you know.
Yeah.
And apparently it's pretty intense, you know. Um
You're you're a difficult guy, Bruce, you know. You're not the easiest guy to get to know.
well, yeah, it's easier in Spanish, I think.
That's your cover. That's your cover.
Yeah, it's much
Hiding
easier.
in.
It's much easier in Spanish. And but yeah, I feel like a tremendous sense of fulfillment putting this information together. I feel like I'm in my own Sherlock episode with Benjamin Cumberhatch, or
Yeah.
Cumberbatch, the
Yeah,
BBC
but
Sherlock series, I mean, holy cow, like I already knew that 72 was a pivotal year. Throw the Mansfield Amendment to defense procurement in there, and there's the whole blueprint for the
yeah,
techno-fascism we're going into. And then
yep,
and then you can see very clearly 2007 was planned, 9/11 was
yep,
planned. There's this
yep,
dormant, there's this now you help me with the case. You be my detective constable. Um,
Once in,
there seems to be not too much from about 72 to 2001. There seems to be like this 29-year lull. And this they repeat the same cycle over and over again. Bubbles. So you've got
yep,
the savings and loan bubble in the 80s.
yep,
Um, you've got the OPEC and the energy bubble in the 70s. In the 90s, you get the technology bubble. And then
yes,
and then everybody's riding these money waves. I'm gonna make my money. And unlike the previous generation where you made your money over a whole lifetime with blue chip investing. Yeah, I bought IBM. You know,
yep,
suddenly in the 80s, this like make it all in 5 years mentality starts. But the bubbles are the only thing I can see happening from 72 to 2001. But now that I've said it aloud and asked the creator if there's anything more, it'll come to me. Because the truth of consciousness, Santo, is we don't manifest, we magnetize. Everything that can be manifest is already manifest. Maybe not physically, but conceptually, it's on the mental plane. And then somebody goes there in a dream or something and brings it
yep,
down into physical reality. So we're not
yep,
manifesting anything. We're magnetizing. And so if
yep.
there's but then 2001 starts and now there's this accelerated pace, and I'll let you go in a minute, but just let me get this out. Here's something I'm hopeful about, okay? And you can call it a cynic's optimism. And I'm becoming more and more infamous for these oxymorons, but nonetheless, the cynic's optimism is that the worst possible scenario will be what wakes people up and forces them to stop using the term conspiracy theory. And then when the collective consciousness is working on something, when humanity is united because, you know, the mad king is the mad king and everybody sees it, that's a higher probability that it's going to turn around. As a Canadian, speaking to my Canadian friends, we cannot believe there's even a possibility this guy, Mark Carney, could get elected after 9 years of Trudeau, and he will be worse than Trudeau in the same policy areas.
Yep.
And nobody's learned a thing. So
No.
there was a big spook. The whole Big Brother thing started when DNA technology came out in the late 80s and early 90s. Oh my God, they can identify us through DNA. More people have been exonerated from death row, falsely convicted through DNA decades after the crime. It's done as much good for the average person as it has for what people thought was going to be an overzealous policing system. I think the digital ID and all the stuff they have coming might have the same effect. So the litmus test is, does it apply across the board? Can everybody, like if the public has a question about a sitting senator, can we call up their GPS data and say, yeah, he was there, charge him? You know what I mean? Because he's got the chip in the arm too. Everybody forgets it goes both ways. And if it doesn't go both ways, then the jig is up between the 50% that would vote for Carney and the 50% who think Canada has become a complete conspiracy. Okay? Then everybody goes to the go ahead. You're
Yeah, I hear, and what you said makes so much sense. If it's already manifest, the word you use, magnetize, is perfect because the potential is always there. It's the ones that orchestrate and are agents for the game that understand that principle perfectly, and they understand where to put the magnet, right?
yeah,
And that process is a little bit like a magician, right?
yeah,
And so they know how to move the intensity. And if you don't see just like you don't see the sleight of hands, you will believe the trick, right?
Yeah.
So, and when you say it's good on both sides, the magician knows how to give the appearance that he's got the chip. I'm putting the chip in my arm. I have the chip in my arm. And everyone goes, yay, he's joined us. We can track him. But they know how to create the illusion of participation, equality, inclusion, all these fanciful words they use. But the club is the club. And the club has always been the club and knows how to be a better magician. All they're realizing is, did they see that trick? And they berate each other for going, hey, you thought you did a thing, but they saw, just like during that period when they pretended to get what was required, and people are going, they forgot to take the lid off.
Yeah.
Hey, so this is a very sophisticated game that the ante goes up and up and up, because the more stage shows you go to, the more you start to see, hey, the rabbit, it was always there. Well, hang on, what's he talking about? Right? That came out of his sleeve, right? So they are aware that they need to up their skill at how to use this magnet. Otherwise, more and more people will see the trick. Now, are people seeing the trick? No. Why aren't they? Where do we start? MK Ultra, programs, TV. The list goes on and on and on. Are institutions helping people become better critical thinkers? No. Are people getting dumber? Yes. Was that planned? Yes. Was it necessary? Because in terms of numbers, a small number, let's say you're at a stage show and 90% of the people are like, whoa. But 10% of the people go, it was in his sleeve. It was in his sleeve. It kind of spoils the show.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, you're kind of in the audience going, hey, it's in his sleeve, right? And
Yeah.
a number of other people are doing it. And they
Yeah.
don't like that. But at the same time, if you're in that magic show, I'd say out of that 90%, 80% would say, stop ruining it. I paid a lot of money to come to this show and it was real. They'll just become these massive deniers because they want to believe the illusion. So we came here to be part of a show. And a
Yeah.
lot of people want to believe the illusion. Bruce, you're spoiling it. Stop with that temple nonsense. You're spoiling my show. I paid a lot of money to get through the reincarnation grid to get here to have a good time. And you're a party pooper, Bruce. You're spoiling the show.
Yeah, I don't know how many people would be taking that attitude. I think you either get it or you don't get it. And if you get what I'm saying, nobody is going to say you're spoiling my show. But there would be a lot of people just saying, what is he talking about? Like, what is this guy talking about? My God, we're going into space. They're talking about colonizing Mars. And this guy is talking about a temple that hasn't been built for 2,000 years, representing 15 million people on a planet of whatever the population is now. And I do believe the population reduction in China is true. I think that they've gone below 500 million people. Um, like I said, I mean, that as I was closing up the Black Star cult, I gave this rationale. I mean, this could all sort of be happening organically, or you could say this or this or this, but it tips in the cynics' favor when they started depopulation in 2020, right? I mean, if they
Yes.
were really making a better world for all of us, and I know a lot of my listeners, you included, overlap with Cliff High, but I don't believe this optimistic future he's seeing for a moment. We're going to get 0 point. How are we going to get 0 point energy? If we've already been locked down by 0 point energy, like the Malaysian flight disappeared with that technology, clearly we have a better understanding of the Mandela effect. I was way ahead of the curve on this because my seventh gen super soldier friend explained the time travel stuff to me as far back as a decade ago in 2015. And
Yep.
I didn't understand it when he first told it to me. And that by about 2017, 2018, I started to see it. And then the first time somebody called me up with the Mandela effect was a friend of mine in Phoenix. Her name is Heather. And she just called up and she said, "Do you remember the lamb and the lion phrase from the Bible?" I said, "Oh yeah. I mean, the lion is what C.S. Lewis was referencing as Christ in all those books." She says, "Go check a Bible. Call me back." I said,
Mm.
"I don't have a physical Bible here." She says, "It doesn't matter. It can be online. The next time you're in a hotel room, check a physical Bible." I go to the Bible, it's wolf. I go, I am 100% certain that's always been. So then the Mandela effect was proven out to me. And this was about 2018. And then I rethought what my super soldier friend told me about how they had been time traveling. Now, here's what I've put together, which is optimistic. This reality always has to stay in balance. It always has to stay in balance. So when the negative gained this technology, which I think they gained, I think we're living in a world built upon technology stolen from the Germans. I don't think the
Mm.
Allies were all the mind control. I think everything came out of Germany. And I think
Yeah.
Germany got into that technology because they saw something in the world, what I'm starting to describe in my podcast. They saw it before anybody else, and to fight it they started. But anyways, now all of this stuff is loose in the world. Now what happens then? Well, that means we enter into a higher level of policing and rebalancing. So the forces that were balancing and governing the earth, which I suspect were largely astral up until about a century ago, now we've got new forces coming in here. Now, this may account for the extraterrestrials making themselves known to us. And Cliff may be right about that. And that, but we're not going to do it. There's no way we human beings can get ourselves out of this. A higher order intelligence has to take pity on us and slowly bring us out of it over 20, 30 years, which I think they're starting now with all of the appearances. And a lot of people are saying the same thing. Chris Bledsoe, who wrote The UFO of God, is saying the same thing as Cliff High. A lot of people are
Yep.
saying, Alex Collier, the Andromedan contactee, is saying the same thing. But really, and I don't mean to always play the cynic, but we're now going into a galactic welfare system. We need galactic
Yep.
welfare now. But the things we've been put through are quite unique. And I don't think every developing race in the universe has gone through the kinds of things we've gone through on planet Earth.
Yeah. Look, you covered sure so much stuff just in that last 5 minutes. But go back to the beginning of the tribal leader, what he was saying. And what he was saying was so simple, but so fundamentally true. But when you fast forward to what you just said in the last 5 minutes, a level of pollution on this planet has been so intense that unless you have been protected from that, not exposed to it, then what he's talking about may as well be a fantasy story, right?
Yeah.
So somehow we're trying to reconcile these two sides of the fence. Now, we bring in extraterrestrials. Now, that raises the issue of, if we can't save ourselves, the question is, are we saved? So there's that question. But then you brought up the issue of zero-point technology. Now, yes, I agree, not just based on what you said with stolen technology, or as Cliff says, they called them the rabbis when they made the deal for the technology with Eisenhower. The reality
No.
is,
Cliff says that the rabbis talked Eisenhower out of the deal with the benign tall whites
that's right.
and shifted us
With
over to the grays.
Exactly. So we did a bad deal, right? Now, humanity got tricked. And so a lot of our technology is on the back of a bad deal. Now, then you bring in zero-point technology. Now, based on what you said about MH370, we know there's so much evidence that the technology that's used is an inversion of the real technology that's available and is already in use, but we're tricked into believing it's coming and it's all potential. Look at the Podesta emails, particularly that email about bringing up zero-point technology, deep references to the Catholic Church and the Catholic institution and their involvement in, guess what? Disclosure of zero-point technology, mixed in with climate change, of course.
Yeah, so the baby rapers are going to give us zero-point technology, please. Right. And for those of you who don't remember the podcast, Santo is referring to the emails I read aloud, written by Edgar Mitchell, the sixth man to walk on the moon. Do you think he really believes that? And he was trying to communicate with John Podesta, linked to Pizzagate and Madeleine McCann's disappearance in Portugal in 2007. And they were talking about zero-point energy and alien disclosure in those emails written in 2014 and 2015. And the very fact that, so if Podesta, of course, was the campaign, deep Democrat insider, with chief of staff for a while for Barack Obama, campaign manager for Hillary Clinton, and as Annika Lucas said on that Patrick Bet David podcast I played a clip of some podcasts back a few months ago, Podesta's in the Pierre Elliott Trudeau class. Fucking snuff. Fucking kill kids. And these are our saviors. These are the people who are going to bring us zero-point technology. I got a break with Uncle Cliff here. I got a break. I don't care I don't care what the web bots are saying.
No, but you're missing the point. You're missing the point.
All right.
Because just like you use the example of the DNA, right? Mm-hmm. Where you say, hey, more murderers have been released on the back of DNA, but there is nefarious stuff being done and potentially able to be done with exactly the same technology. Use the same mindset with zero-point technology and bring in the so-called benevolent alien species and weave in the topic of zero-point technology there. So just like DNA, are we facing a situation where there's the potential for us to be able to be exposed to a purer, cleaner form of energy if it's given the correct way, just like the DNA, and used correctly? Or is it going to be hijacked again, right?
Yeah.
And that's when we were talking last week or something. I said, well, are we going to go through these stages of civilization where we purify through the right source and relearn how to engage with this energy, e.g. Tartarian style, where they had an understanding, but it was still hijacked, but it was a purer source.
Yeah.
So is there something going on here at another layer that's been introduced via benevolent ETs that they will actually make themselves more involved and going, no, this time you're not going to trick them. This, a little
So
bit like what happened with nuclear weaponry, where they went, no, you've
yeah,
gone too far, we're coming in. Is the same thing going to happen with energy?
it's a very interesting question. And rather than answer it, I'll give it more context. I believe that the creator and the incarnational process here not only seeds the saints and the mystics and the prophets, it also seeds the poets, the inventors, on all of these sorts of people. By my estimation, we've been on a completely corrupt timeline. You could start with Tesla, which would be right at the beginning of the 20th century. I would start it after the moderns left literature. And I mean, look what they did to Ezra. Ezra Pound saw it. Ezra Pound, you go back and you listen to the lectures of Ezra Pound given on Italian radio during World War II. He sounds like a podcaster on the Alex Jones network. Okay? And he was the preeminent symbologist of his time. He's what they're trying to pretend that Dan Brown character is in the Da Vinci Code. I mean, Ezra Pound was a poetic genius. He taught himself he taught himself Chinese. He could read and write Chinese. It was an American guy. He edited T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. He edited James Joyce's Ulysses. Okay. So you have all of this energy and all of these ideas. They should have manifested 100 years ago. We have literally lived a dead century from about 1925 to 2025. And these fuckers have been in control for 100 years. And let's call them what they are. They're the rabbis. Okay?
Yeah, but that's where the Men in Black narrative fits perfectly because the surveillance of the fellow you mentioned, because the assessment of potential is the biggest threat. And so you need a team now, and they do have. So it's not just the Men in Black, it's the manifestation of the surveillance states that are being created and the ability to create the misinformation, disinformation narrative is all an extension of the Men in Black narrative spreading down to normal society.
Yeah.
So when that spread happens, it means that the threat is real and greater. It's just a force from both sides pushing and pushing. Which way it goes, we don't know yet, but we do know it's becoming incredibly intense, right? So the concept of Men in Black was just a almost fictional Hollywood, sort of series thing, whereas more and more people are starting to think about it. Oh, those people with chicken-looking skin, yeah, it's not just a TV concept. So we have to kind of wrap our heads around the forces on both sides, whether it's about chips, whether it's about zero point technology, or whether it's about manifestation of all the way from the Men in Black that people like, Bob and that have full understanding, the extension of that into your neighbor's house
Do
or
you
your
think
own house.
here's a curveball question for you. Do you think Chris Carter's X-Files was produced out of Langley?
I got no idea.
It's an
I
excellent
got no
question,
idea.
right? Because they
Why
do,
did you ask?
well, because they did. I never watched the X-Files, but I know it was like one of the first TV shows that people just went bananas for, like
Yeah.
like me with The Sopranos or True Detective. But as you know, Santo, I've never been a sci-fi guy. The only
Right.
sci-fi book I would recommend is Blade Runner: Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? But I would recommend that to people who are fascinated by Gnosticism and the archons. So there was an overlay into my spiritual and religious studies, which have been central to my life. And but it's interesting that right smack dab in the 80s, they drop all this disclosure in the X-Files. But to the best of
Yeah.
my knowledge, I don't know if they ever did a Men in Black episode on the X-Files. I
Well,
don't
it's
think,
worth following up. It's worth following up because I think in retrospect, it's a little bit like The Simpsons. You've got to kind of be at this point and look back and go, how did they figure that then? And I wouldn't be surprised that it wasn't an accident that that thought came up, that there is a connection. Maybe not overtly, but disclosure type hints that now looking back, but who's got the time to go through all that? But I would not be surprised that it was a seeding opportunity
yeah,
for that type of activity to become uh, disclosed in a way that is part of your, yeah, I saw that in a movie, I saw that on TV.
yeah,
And it's always timed perfectly so that that seed that people have has to sit there for a number of years or decades
yeah.
so that when they hit the button, people are like, oh, yeah, yeah, saw that 20 years ago in the series.
So,
Hey,
assuming my theory on the lost century is true, from 1925 to 2025, and what I said earlier about the creator seeding the poets and the inventors, Nikola Tesla was born and he spoke to the world, and we were not allowed to engage him. This man in black force came in and rooted in finance. It was JP Morgan that did him in. Okay.
yep,
Um, so what do you think that does to us as a species psychologically? Do you think
it's no,
everybody feels that knot in their solar plexus, like this is not a normally unfolding reality?
yes, but it's no different to what the Sicilian mafia did, where you just didn't hear the gunshot. What gunshot, right?
Yeah.
Because to talk about it does not serve you or your family. You don't want to wake up with a horse's head next to you, right?
Are
So
you are you
it's
tell
kind,
are you telling me to stop the Talamanca review, Santo? Are you
no, there's
giving
no
are you
horses.
giving me the Sicilian kiss here, Santo?
No, there's no horses there. You got nothing to worry about.
There's horses all over this mountain. What are you talking about? There's horses in my family.
Well, make sure there's your fences, keep them at a distance, or lock the bedroom door. But the
Yeah,
point is, this feeling is real
yeah.
because whether it was Martin Luther King, JFK, it's all the same. You look at how the mood globally instantly changes.
And
People call that,
isn't it interesting that the only people telling us we're paranoid and crazy, and look, I'm doing my best not to be a one-trick pony here. I don't want to get that label, but you can't help but notice that in every decade, there's some Jew or group of Jews trying to make us think this is all normal. Whether it be Jerry Seinfeld or Ben Shapiro now and the Daily
yep,
Wire and every
yep.
and do you think they know what they're doing consciously, or they're just so brainwashed by getting the foreskin of their penis clipped off and the trauma of that and you know
Yes, yes, and no. Yes, and no. Because it takes a degree of courage to do what they do, particularly the Seinfelds. So to be able to construct a show that is a form of disclosure in a very humorous way does take some courage.
How was
And they do poke.
how was Seinfeld disclosure?
Well, they kind of throw, and this is the interesting part. They will make fun of their own people openly and have episodes about it. But it works both ways. For those that see it, they go, ah, they're really revealing something about themselves in a humorous way in a show, which is a real dark side of that group. But the other way is by doing that, you normalize it, just like Hollywood normalizes things. So, depending upon where they sit as individuals, are they normalizing it or are they disclosing self disclosure? It can be either one. And sometimes you don't know till the final scene whether their intention was, a little bit like some of these movie directors.
Yeah.
You think they are soft disclosure, but were they really just doing covers for the real event? A bit like, there's going to be a fake alien invasion. They're going, now, is there or isn't there? That's not the point. The point is the people that participated in many versions of the creation of it, were they participants in setting the scene for normalizing it, or were they soft disclosure to get people
Well,
thinking about it?
you and I can look at this even in a more personal way with some of the personalities we've known in the last 5 years who publicly presented as agents of hope, but were really steeped in the Black Star agenda. And I think with the case of the guy I journalistically decapitated, he was conscious of what he was doing. And there's another gentleman we both know. I have come to the conclusion he's conscious of what he's doing. Our
Yeah,
Celtic friend in the UK has had a huge awakening, and just
yeah,
this has all just become crystal clear to her now.
yeah,
I spoke to her for about an hour and 15 minutes today.
yeah.
And and it's everywhere you go.
Yeah, but if you think about it,
Somebody hands you an ice cream cone and you don't even know you're licking shit until somebody tells, "Hey, it's like we've been hypnotized."
yeah.
You know,
But
here
you bring up those examples, right? And I think there is a direct correlation when you think about the individuals between the agreements they've made with the amount of compromising they've made in those agreements as to what the predictable outcome may be. And
yeah,
the more sophisticated the agreements you make, the more you need to think about what you may be compromising tacitly or not as part of that agreement. And we're all human. And eventually, the bigger, the more complex agreement you have, you better have a good consigliere to run their eye over it. Otherwise, it'll be too late. And that's the difficult phase we're going to face where people intentionally were part of the dark cult versus those that unintentionally got compromised. And
yeah,
this is where the cosmic Nuremberg 2.0 is going to have an interesting time trying to go, listen, we forgive you for being stupid versus no, you don't get forgiven. You knew you were voluntarily signing up to the Dark Star cult, and there's no probation, nothing. See you later. So it's very, very difficult because it is a case by case now deconstruction of compromised agreements
yeah,
at all levels. And if we jump the gun, we will misjudge people
yeah, yeah,
at a soul level. We'll misjudge them.
yeah,
So it's going to take an incredible amount of wisdom and patience to rehabilitate and look at all these agreements and stop the ongoing game of presenting more and more agreements on top of compromised agreements. And once one person's compromised, guess what? It's a lot easier to compromise them,
yeah.
right? Now, you think of the amount of people in the Senate and that did something stupid
Yeah.
and now are going, you want me to do what? Okay, guess I better do it.
Yeah.
JFK Jr., case in point.
You think he's under the thumb?
It just is unexplainable what's happened in the last month.
What, be specific. What are you referring to? We don't, when we're speaking about people
Well,
we know in common for a podcast, we have to
yep. Okay.
maintain their privacy, but here we don't.
Okay. Well, really, he wrote the book. He pretty well exposed what was going on with jabs, right?
Yep.
The underbelly of it, he described in the book. He went publicly saying this nonsense has to stop. He said it in a number of places, a number of platforms.
Yeah.
He was selected, elected, whatever you want to call it, to play a role.
Yeah.
He started in a interesting way of focusing more around foods and all the crap in foods. And you go, oh, well, at least it's a start.
Yeah.
But recently has supported and is promoting jabs for measles,
Well,
knowing what's in them.
not only that, Santo, the Trump administration has just signed off on the biggest mRNA platform ever for the chicken flu or the bird flu or whatever
Bird
it
flu.
is.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. So this level of submission means some level of domination and control that you just have no choice, or you've reached a point of compromise. Now, there's all sorts of hypotheticals around JFK in terms of the material that is being used uh, about
Well,
his compromised past, right?
yeah, I mean they're pantsmen, those Kennedys, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
they just can't control themselves. Even, even Teddy's got buried girls over there in Kennebunkport or whatever.
yeah, yeah. But so what? If their
At this point,
intentions were pure,
at this point, when you're talking about compromising the deoxyribonucleic acid of the whole species, which is in many ways our evolutionary record, which that DNA becomes the platform to transcend chemical consciousness and go transcendent. They
yeah,
now
yeah,
they can set us back 100,000 years in our evolution if they want to.
exactly. But the difficulty is with these people that are in these key positions, the attention tends to focus around the material that they can so expertly bring up at the appropriate time to pull a card of compromise and, smear their character. That's their style. Look what they do to Candace Owens, what Shmuley did. That's the way they operate, right? But the reality, it's real for them because it's not just about feeling as though you've exposed yourself in terms of your weaknesses and the whole world can see it. I think for some people, they're thinking more than that. They're thinking this could mean life or death, i.e., JFK style. So it is a real difficult thing that I don't think we can assess the decision making that these people have to make, not just in terms of compromise and exposure, but life and death. Like
Yeah.
even Musk has said, I think they're going to kill me. He said it a number of times. Why does he keep saying it?
Yeah. 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 Well, you want to wind it up? That's been about an hour and
Yep.
10 minutes, an hour and
Oh,
15.
oh yeah, it's gone over your prescribed time.
I'm I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review. Good night, Santo.
Good night. Thanks.